this is Stella from Left on Red, and this is Bread and Roses, the political podcast for the intellectually and aesthetically curious. With me today, I have Gavin Callaghan, who is the leader of Basildon Council, and we will be talking about reform and homelessness in his area and how the Labour government is doing in regards to local councils. Gavin, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.
Why don't we start by you telling us a little bit about your background, when you got into politics, and why?
So I'm not from a particularly political family at all. I grew up in Chadwell Heath and Romford in East London. I moved out to Basildon when I was in my teens, and I became the first man in my family to go to university. I ended up going to Newcastle to study politics for no other reason than I did well in my A-levels. And that was pretty much the science behind why I went up there. And I was adamant when I finished university. I graduated in 2010, just after Cameron and Clegg had got in. And I was adamant that I was never going to work in politics. I was going to go into the media. That was what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a football commentator. That was my dream job. But within 2 years, I was elected onto Basildon Council. And part of that was Baroness Angela Smith, who was the former MP for Basildon. I managed to have a conversation with her, and then that was it. She got her tentacles in and was like, "You're standing in the council election." And then in 2012, I agreed to do it on the proviso that I stood in an unwinnable. But it was also the omni-shambles budget when George Osborne ended up with pasty taxes and church taxes and everything else. And so I ended up winning the seat and got elected age 23 onto Basildon Council. And as they say, the rest is history. But I am incredibly, as you get older, I become more passionate about local government and about wanting to make a difference to the area that I live in and love. My wife and my two kids are now being brought up in the area. So every day I get to go to work and hopefully make a difference to where they are growing up and what they see and feel.
And now you're doing media as well. So you told me, so you are really living your 20-year-old self's dream career. You were on GB News, and you've told me that pretty much half the residents in your council watch GB News.
Yeah.
What did you make of it? You told me you went on Patrick Christie's show and you did one of the breakfast shows as well. Yeah. Did you enjoy it?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I'd like to be commentating at Wembley Stadium on Sunderland in the playoff final. That would be the absolute dream. But GB News was a close second. But it's a different form of media, isn't it? I think 12 months ago, would I have said yes to some of the bids? Probably not. But there is a reality, which is that, that is where the majority of my public are watching their news now. And I think we need to be on there and challenging some of the narratives and putting our views across on some of the arguments that they're making.
So how has the voting base in your constituency changed? How have the demographics changed? Which parties are up? Which parties are down in Basildon?
Yeah, so it's interesting. So I stood in 2015 in the general election in Basildon and Billericay, an unwinnable seat. John Barron was the MP at the time, and we did it to kind of help out in South Basildon where we thought we might have a chance of nicking the seat. Really, in the last 10 years, has the Labour vote shifted massively in that time? The answer is no. But the right vote has definitely split to the point where I would say today, I think that the Conservative vote is all but collapsing in and around me, around Basildon. And it is moving towards reform at a very, very fast pace. If you think over the last 10 years, Basildon, 73% vote leave. It's a very Brexit town. That average is probably skewed by the more affluent part of my borough. I have the fifth most economically unequal borough in Basildon. So I have half the West Ham football players live in Billericay and in the affluent areas. And I have higher rates of child poverty in Basildon than you'd get in Barnsley or Bolton or other parts of the country. And that is changing the dynamic. London has always moved east. We're a new town. We were created after the Second World War by Clement Attlee to help displaced Londoners. And that's always been the case. I came from the London Borough of Barking and Dagenham back in 2004. It's always happened. But clearly there is now a change in the demographic. There's a change in nationalities, change in languages around the borough. And that's creating a bit of a melting pot at the moment, which Reform are trying to exploit. And my administration in Basildon is trying to say, actually, that diversity can be our strength, and that can be the next chapter in this new town story that's a positive for everybody.
So you've told me that a big problem in your constituency, in your area, is. Sorry, you're not an MP. I need to stop trying to use. Yeah,
I have a bigger area than an MP as a
exactly, and more power as a leader of the council. There's a big problem with London boroughs buying a lot of homes for temporary accommodation. Yep. Do you want to tell me a bit about that?
Yeah, so listen, temporary accommodation, I don't think it gets anywhere near the kind of media coverage that I think it deserves. One of the consequences of the Liz Truss budget is that it completely broke the private housing market, particularly in a place like Basildon. So I have people in temporary accommodation right now that are living in hotel rooms with their 2 teenage children. Mums and dads living in hotel rooms with 2 teenage children. They were people that for 10, 15 years were renting privately, paying £1,000, £1,100 a month rent for a 2-3 bedroom property. Overnight, after that mini budget, the rent on that property became £1,800, £1,900 a month. Those people were not able to afford to pay it. And as a consequence, they ended up presenting at the council as homeless and then now in temporary accommodation. That's within my borough. So we've seen around 800 families where that has happened to them since September 22 and that Liz Truss budget. But what is also adding even more pressure to the private rented market is that London boroughs are also facing exactly the same pressures, but they have a bigger amount of money to be able to spend. So if you consider that to house a family in a hotel room costs about £27,000 a year, actually for those London boroughs, you're talking about millions of pounds that they end up spending each year on those hotels. It is cheaper for them to start buying houses, or in some cases buying whole buildings and doing the kind of permitted development office to resi conversions. So when I came back as leader last May, there was lots of that happening around the borough. That causes huge tensions. People get sent with a train ticket and say, get yourself off the train at Basildon and then head to this address and that's where you're going to be situated. These are often very vulnerable people. There's no wraparound support for them. English might not be their first language, so there's not necessarily school places for their children. There's not necessarily the support within those schools for their children. And it is creating a real melting pot of tension within communities. Now, I think that the government could be doing stuff around lifting the local housing allowance cap as an example. So if you look at the last 12 months, there's only been 3 2-bedroom properties become available in the private rented sector at LHA levels for Basildon. That's unbelievably bad when I need hundreds of these homes. So what we need, in my opinion, is we need to, make it the case that LHA rates can keep pace with local housing markets. And then B, we need to be able to stop boroughs who perhaps have a higher LHA rate, like London boroughs, being able to spend that out of borough in places like Basildon and Thurrock and Harlow, in some of those areas where it's cheaper housing, but they can outbid the local authorities, because that's, again, I think deeply unfair to local residents.
So you said that there is tension locally. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? Like, what do you mean when you say tension?
So as I said, if for people, living on a street. So again, as a new town, we've had lots of families that perhaps moved into Basildon in the 60s or 70s. That it's been their family home. Mum and dad moved there. Maybe the son or daughter took it on. Now own it because of right to buy. We had lots of people buying their council houses under right to buy. Whatever you think of that. All of a sudden now, when you look at perhaps next door, that house has become a HMO. And a London borough has bought that property and they've turned it into a HMO. That's not in keeping with the way that the road and the community has been for many years.
It's not a community anymore, right? Because
Exactly.
If someone is only there as temporary, that they don't become a part of the community.
Exactly right. And those guys, by the way, who are coming to Basildon from Newham, from Hackney, from Brent, wherever it might be, they don't want to be there. They want to live in the borough where they've chosen to start their family and for their kids to go to school and where their healthcare is. They don't want to be shipped out to Basildon on a Tuesday afternoon and sent off to an address for 6 months. So, they're in a bad place. The local area, instead of for sale signs, what we're now seeing going up around the community are HMO signs, rooms to let. And again, lots of people sitting here saying, my friend Dave and Jane used to live in that house, and now all of a sudden it's been turned into a HMO where there's 5 different families. There's people coming and going at all hours of the day, all hours of the night. And it creates suspicion, and it doesn't create community, and there isn't integration. We might come on to it, but I think one of the tragedies over the last 15 years has been that we've ripped out of our communities so many places for that integration, so many places for people to commune and come together. So that in part is why you're seeing Reform capitalise on that. So I see every day on social media when I say I'm building new housing or I'm about to regenerate this building, I see people say to me every day, yes, for London boroughs. The only people that are going to move into that property are London boroughs. The only people that are going to be able to afford to move into it are London boroughs. So as a council, we're having to introduce policies, some of which haven't yet been tested through the courts, but policies around offering greater protections for local people. So, for example, if a brand new home is built for rent or for sale, it can only be marketed for rent or sale to somebody with a Basildon postcode for 12 months to try and give local people first dibs on, if you're buying, most of it goes off plan, doesn't it? So hopefully a lot of those homes will be sold to local Basildon people. Similarly in the rental market. But we also have to be clear about it. For private homeowners, if they're putting their houses on the market today in Basildon, the chances are they're going to sell those properties to somebody who's currently got a London Borough postcode because they'll get more money for it if they do that, and it's a private market. I'm seeing that tension grow. I'm seeing Reform capitalise on it. I'm seeing the narrative around housing and regeneration really changing. And that's why I think you've got to really, as a council, be on the front foot about this to kind of give your public confidence that you are putting protections in place for them.
To me, it sounds like a good thing to do, to give local residents for 12 months first dibs in properties in their area. But do you have, does that mean that you're going to get, for example, sued by local developers because they want the wealthier people to bid on their
Don't give them ideas. Basically. they've not sued us yet. And in fact, what we're finding is that a lot of the developers, I think, are also understanding the reputational risks at play for them as well.
Absolutely. We are watching.
Yeah. So for example, if you are a major FTSE 100 developer and you want to come in with a planning application for 500 homes, but I subsequently find that you've sold 200 of those homes off plan to a London borough, because it's cheaper for the London borough to do that than to put people in TA in hotels and bed and breakfast or whatever. Don't be surprised if my planning officers next time round try and find a few reasons why maybe your planning application doesn't quite get the support from the local authority that it might do. So the developers understand that, which is why actually they engage with us really positively. And what they say to us is, we want these properties to be for the community. We want the properties to do well and for it to be a part of the borough for the next 50, 60 years. And so touch wood, so far they've all played ball signing up to the charter, the Basildon First Charter that I introduced, to give those residents and those local people that protection. They're on board with it. And the trick now, I think, is for more councils across the country to follow what Basildon has done and to try and put more protections in place for local people.
For something like that, though, right, you do need to have local councillors and a council leader who's been embedded in the community for a long time and basically knows what they're doing and knows and can foresee this kind of problems. Do you think that all of these new reform councils, a lot of these people will be, I think that reform represents a lot of property owners at the moment. They have become the party of the property owners compared to Labour, and obviously there is a lot of money swishing around from property developers. But I would say that looking at reforms housing policies that they are becoming a lot more NIMBY. Do you think that they are likely to see an issue with allowing people to sell their houses for as expensively as they can in the market?
Well, I think we saw it a little bit a few weeks ago with Farage when he announced some of his economic policies. He's trying to look both ways, and he's going to get found out. And I think the Tories have tried to do a little bit of this as well. So, for example, it's all well and good to be a NIMBY. So if I look in my borough, it's all well and good to say, we don't want to build, not in my backyard. But at the same time, Farage's electoral base is amongst the council housing white working class in Basildon. And let me tell you, they are desperate for more council housing to be built. They are desperate for their sons and daughters, their grandchildren, who've perhaps been on the waiting list for 5, 10, 15 years waiting to get a council house. They are desperate for more council housing to be built. Now, my challenge to reform is, where are you going to build them? And if you're against every development that's coming forward, and if you're against the churn, because that's the other part of this, is we need more churn. So I get it in the neck quite a bit in my patch for building 1-bedroom flats. But actually, we need 1-bedroom flats because we've got a lot of elderly people sat in 4 or 5-bedroom homes who want to downsize, who want to be close to a town centre to create that churn in the market. They don't seem to be as mature in their arguments and their thinking just yet on that stuff. Now, thankfully, at this moment in time, I don't have any reform councillors in Basildon, and long may that continue. And we'll be working very hard in a by-election in the next few weeks to make sure that there aren't any after that by-election. But I don't think they've fully thought that through. And it's going to be really hard for Farage to kind of appeal to the kind of middle ground Tory voter, the Church of England kind of centre-right Tory, whilst at the same time appealing to the working class council estate voter over housing, because there is a tension between the two and you've got to pick a side.
I think that Nigel Farage is perfectly capable of appealing to that kind of working class voter. The problem is that I do not trust that he's able to deliver for that kind of voter, and whether he manages to convince people or not, I guess we will find out. The other thing I really want to talk to you about is there is a tension in the Labour Party right now about whether Labour is better off electorally if they try to convince voters to not move to reform, or they try to cast a wider net in the broader left-wing coalition and try to stick to Labour values and stick to more the type of person, the type of voter who usually goes for Labour. Which camp do you place yourself in?
So listen, I've thought about this for quite a while because, you know, I faced UKIP back in 2014, 2015, 2016. And I had Farage and the UKIP battle bus driving through my borough in the 2016 local election, just a few weeks before the referendum when I was up for election. Beat UKIP in that election then, and we'll beat them again under their new guys' reform in Basildon in the future. And for me, I think it's all about credibility, right? So one of the things I think we're quite poor at as a Labour Party is really pinning the Tories' mistakes on them. So for the last 14 years, we talk about austerity. If I walk down Basildon High Street today and I ask 100 people, what does austerity mean? 10, 15 of them might know. The majority of people wouldn't have a clue. But if I start saying to them, do you understand that the Tories ripped out your police stations, your fire stations, your libraries, your children's centres, your local swimming pool, your leisure centres? That's what they did to our communities. They ripped out, they gutted the DNA of those communities. Then they understand that. And if you're a white working class, if you're a white van man in Basildon, right, let's just play this through. You get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, you open your curtains and it's pitch black because the street lights have been turned off to save money. You go out your front door at 5 o'clock in the morning. It's 50-50 whether your van's still on the drive because car theft's going through the roof. If it is still on the drive, it's a lottery as to whether or not your tools are still in it. But if everything's gone to plan so far and your car and your tools are fine, you start driving off down the road. You've got to avoid the potholes that have done your tyres and your suspension in and cost you a fortune so far, but they've still not been filled in. You get to the traffic lights, you sat there. On the one side, you've got weeds and grass on the central reservation overflowing. On the other side, you've got a bus stop that's covered in graffiti and bins overflowing. You drive off into London and you're paying a congestion charge and ULEZ and everything else. 12 hours later, you come home from work, having been on the tools all day. You pull into your road, and on the grass verge on the side of it, there's a dumped mattress and sofa and fly tip rubbish and all the rest of it that the council hasn't cleared. You get to the last day of the month, you look at your paycheck, and you've been taxed more money than you've ever been taxed before. 24 hours later, first day of the new month, your direct debit comes out, and you've been charged more council tax than you've ever been charged before. I understand why people are pretty pissed off at the moment. I understand why people are looking at that saying, the state has given up on me. They're not looking after the basics that I see every single day. And for me, I got into politics because I'm from a working class family, and I go round my borough and I talk to these residents who are saying to me, Gav, you're talking about building 1.5 million new homes. You're talking about putting more money into defence. You're talking about putting more money into the NHS. You can't even get the fly tips picked up. You can't even get the grass cut. Now, thankfully in Basildon we are, because we're taking care of those basics. But across the country, that's what people are seeing every single day. And so it's not really a surprise. It's not a left or right thing. It's about, is the state treating the working class fairly and properly? And I don't think anybody right now could honestly say that we are. And a year into the Labour government, my frustration, if I think back to that spending review last week, who was out there fighting to reverse the Eric Pickles, George Osborne, David Cameron cuts to local government? Mm-hmm. Who was out there saying we need to reinstate the revenue support grant? It wasn't the LGA. I mean, they were nowhere to be seen. We haven't got anybody who's out there saying, give local government its money back. The John Prescott figure, right? Prescott, whatever you thought of him, wouldn't let Blair away with...
I thought he was great.
Yeah, but he wouldn't have let, the cuts. He's special advisor at the time, now works for me in Basildon, so I hear about Prescott every day. But, those basic fundamentals... You win the right to govern by winning an election, right? And that means you've got to have good candidates, a good leader, a disciplined campaign, absolutely. But you then have to prove to the public that you can govern. And you have to prove that you can pull all of the different levers of power to get things done and get things changed, and then people see it. Mm-hmm. And I don't think for working class people we've done it anywhere near strongly enough yet.
I was saying exactly the same thing. So it's quite spooky to hear you now say that. It's not about left or right, as you said. It's about the kind of difference that a voter can see in their day-to-day life. When the next election comes, a voter is going to ask themselves, am I better off? What has changed in my life? Yeah. What physical improvement do I see? And obviously local councils are the first line of defense, the first thing that voters see, whether their trash is being collected and their streets are clean.
And that is so critical. That line of, am I better off, right, at the next election? And that is not just about, have I got more money in my pocket? Because working class people do not expect the government to solve all of their problems, right? They are fully aware, in my view and my experience of working class people in Basildon, that you've got to get off your backside and you've got to go to work, you've got to graft, and you've got to look after yourself and your family. And they're up for it. But what they also want is they want to make sure that if they're paying the highest level of council tax in history, and if they're paying a lot of money in income tax and everything else, that councils and the state is taking care of the basics. So, for example, yes, we've got to fix the NHS, right? We've got to put money into it. There's no doubt about that. But is the white van man in Basildon waking up tomorrow morning at 4 o'clock going, it's brilliant that there are more hospital appointments available today? Or is he saying, they've got that pothole filled that I've been driving over for 6 months. They've got that fly tip taken away. The area's looking more... My kids can go and play in the park now because it's tidier. The walk to school for my children is safer because we've now got community safety wardens and more visible police out on the street. That's the stuff that is equally as important to people as the pound in their pocket. And we've got to look after that.
Okay, I have a trick question for you. Council budgets need to go up. What do you cut or do you borrow? What do you do?
So I think one of the other really great things that we're doing that no one talks about in government is local government reorganisation, right? So this isn't sexy and it's not going to be on the front page of the paper. But if you look in my borough in Basildon, we're in a two-tier system. So we've got Essex County Council and we've got Basildon District Council. I don't know any other business, right, that goes out at the end of every month with its invoices and collects revenue from all of its people and then goes and gives 80% of it away, which is what a district council does. So if I take 200 quid a month off you in council tax, I give 160 of it away immediately to the county council. It's madness. And for the first time since 1974, we have a government who is saying that is wholly inefficient, it is ridiculous, and we're going to simplify it, change it. So Essex is on the devolution priority programme. And that means we're going to go from having 15 councils in Essex to hopefully, God willing, if they listen to me, 5 councils in the county of Essex. That will save literally hundreds of millions of pounds in back office costs, in inefficiency in the system. It will get infrastructure money being spent. So in the county of Essex at the moment, we are sat on £140 million of unspent infrastructure money from 106 contributions. You can start getting that money out the door and spent in a much better way. Now, the government, Jim McMahon, God love him, is saying he's doing this and he's putting his shoulder to the wheel to getting this done. It's brilliant and it's the right thing to do. That will save some money. That will make things better. But, you know, I come back to it. You hear a lot from my voters and Farage about net zero. Have we won the right with the public to make those big wholesale changes yet? Have we proven to them that we can govern and we can take care of the basics by funding local governments, seeing changes? You know, Tony Blair talks about how a democracy is not about giving people what they want. It's about convincing them of what they need. To do that, you have to have some credibility in the bank. And I think nationally and locally, every day in government, when you're running a council, when you're running the country, I'm sure, on a much, much larger, more difficult, complex scale than these ministers are running things compared to me, every day it's about, do I have credibility with the public? Do I have credibility with voters? Have I shown them I'm capable of making change happen? And until you have, it's very hard to get traction with them.
So how do you feel Labour is doing at the moment when it comes to councils and their local government policy? You said that you like what Tim McMahon is doing.
Mm-hmm. So I think all across the country, I mean, I would say this, right, because I'm biased, but I'm not sure that there is any other sector within the public sector who has been as innovative as local government has been over the last 15 years. Like I say, you know, you see cuts, real terms cuts to the NHS, and you see NHS England as was out there fighting for getting more investment. You hear it when it comes to the railways and people wanting more investment. Local government has kind of taken these cuts that has been inflicted on it, and it has kept the show on the road.
So you don't think any councils have done any mismanagement as it comes to their budgets?
Of course, there's been some horror stories. You know, one of the things that I'm having to look at right now is Thurrock and the debt that Thurrock have got, and you know, there's been terrible stories about that. But right now, Labour councillors and Labour council leaders all across this country are delivering first-class services on a daily basis in incredibly difficult times. If you go and cut children's services the way that the Tories did, if you go and cut library services, if you go and decimate communities in the way that they did, then you take away a lot of the prevention agenda. So it's a vicious cycle where people end up with higher demand on services, children's services being one of them. Every day our councils are doing great work at tackling that and being innovative about how they can make that pound go further. And I tip my hat off to councillors all over the country who are doing that. But for me, I think what local government really needs to kind of consider, and there needs to be a Labour vision for this, is what do we see the role of councils being over the next 10, 15 years in our communities? Because it's all well and good creating mayors, and you know, I am in support of mayors. I think they are the right thing to do for delivery of infrastructure projects. But in communities, what do we want local councils to do? And I'm not sure that there has been a full in-depth analysis of that. Over and above, keep the show on the road, keep services ticking over. And as I say, in the spending review, we didn't get, we got some money, more than we would have got under the Tories, and Angela Rayner did us a good turn there. But and particularly around the 39 billion for affordable housing, which is a really good thing. But what's community going to look like? What's the future of leisure services? What's the future of children's services going to look like? That's really, really important. And beyond local government reorganisation, which is complex and needed, I'm not sure we've really thought that through yet as a party.
What would you like to see in the next budget?
I'd like to see us go back and reinstate the revenue support grant. I'd like to see councils given the opportunity. Take COVID as an example. This was always something. I led Basildon Council during the COVID crisis, and in the winter of 2020, Basildon had the highest incident rate of COVID anywhere in the country. Right, so we were right in the eye of the storm in Basildon, and when it comes to the press conferences that you saw on the telly. Who set up the testing sites and the testing centres? Who got the food packages out to those who were shielding and were vulnerable? Who got the grants to the businesses in their bank accounts inside 24 hours? It was councils that did it. It was councils that could stand those services up and be connected to their communities in a really fast way and deliver. Now, we never got any credit for that. You didn't see the head of the LGA at Downing Street on a press conference talking to, with the Prime Minister. You didn't see the public turning around saying, our council's doing a really great job at protecting us. Local government just got on with it and it got on and delivered the services that people needed. I look at it now and I think we have a huge crisis in Send, right, in children's services at the moment. We have a major crisis in terms of white working class boys and their outcomes and their future and what life is going to be like for them. We as a party are talking about creating new towns. My one is a Clement Attlee new town in Basildon, right? We're talking about creating the next wave of those new towns. Councils are going to be critical in preventing people from falling into poverty, preventing people from falling into homelessness, and critically, in my opinion, providing ladders of opportunity for people. And I give you one example of it. I don't talk in my borough about building 27,000 homes, even though I need to build 27,000 homes. I talk about how by building 27,000 homes, I am creating a job for life for every Basildon, Bricky, Chippy and Sparky. So we've created a construction academy in Basildon in the last 12 months in light of what the government have done around housing and regeneration. And our whole thing is about skills. So we're saying to working class people, if you want a job for life, come and train, get a trade with us on the tools here. Now, as a council, if we had more power over the adult skills budget, if we had more cash in the bank to be able to really invest in, we could target skills programs far better than some of these other programs that I see floating off around the country, which never deliver anything. Sure. Boot camps and all that, they don't do anything. Councils could do more on that.
For sure. Well, I hope Keir Starmer is listening and Rachel Reeves, most importantly. Gavin, thank you so much. This was great.
Thank you.